But when it comes to drugs, it's like, oh. But in reality, alcohol it's just a drug. That's all it is. It's just another drug. So according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, we often refer to it as the DSM-4, which is the most current one that's published by the American Psychiatric Association. If you were to end up getting into some type of a more regular or full-time counseling position, you might want to front the money to buy the manual. Particularly if you pursue more education and you want to get licensed, because your test will be based off this manual. And basically what it is, it's a manual that describes and gives you a code for all mental health disorders. And of course, addictions fall under that, as well as the co-occurring disorders with it. So basically, here's their definition of substance dependence. When an individual persists in use of alcohol or other drugs despite problems related to use of the substance, substance dependence may be diagnosed. Compulsive and repetitive use may result in tolerance to the effect of the drug and withdrawal symptoms when use is reduced or stopped. This, along with substance abuse, are considered substance use disorders. So this is how the manual refers to that. So addiction can include prescription medications. I already mentioned that to you. Prescription addiction is basically a serious health problem in the United States today. As a matter of fact, prescription medication abuse was described as an epidemic by researchers from the University of Nebraska Medical Center College of Medicine in 2012 of November. And it hasn't gotten better. Okay? So basically we have an epidemic. Today, it seems like the hot topic today is heroin. And the reason is that heroin is so inexpensive. And so a lot of drug users, when they can't afford or get the money for their cocaine or some of their other more expensive street drugs, they will end up going to heroin. The problem is that heroin will squeeze the life out of them. And so now we're having a tremendous problem of people ODing with heroin. There are some specific hot spots, particularly in the northern part of the United States, where in some cities they're having one or multiple people overdose every day on heroin. And I'm not talking necessarily about big cities either. It's just it's so inexpensive and so readily available that people are going to it. And that's the problem with addictions. Addiction says, I know it could kill me, but I gotta have it. Okay? Let's see, in the USA during the 1990s, the decade of pain treatment, now not only was there a change in medication, but also in policy. They used to have 4 criteria in diagnosing. But in the 90s, because comfort care, or what we call palliative care, became so popular, it was new and exciting, which means the treatment of pain, eventually the whole medical system adopted a 5th diagnosis area, and that diagnosis area is pain. It's the treatment of pain. So now when you go in, sometimes, have you ever seen the little yellow chart that has the 10 faces on it? Yeah, and the doctor says, which one of these describes you? Okay, and so the reason the faces are there is for the doctor or the nurse to use. But the numbers are for you. So number 1 will be an okay, pleasant face. Your pain's not that bad. You're still feeling pretty good. And then you'll notice on the little yellow circles, the faces, they get the grimace or the frown gets more and more and more until at 10, he's like, okay, like that. And so if a person tells you, oh, well, my pain, okay, a drug person seeking drugs going into an emergency room may say, I hurt myself, my back. I got a bad back problem, and I need some pain medicine. Okay, this is a drug addict with no real back problem. And then they know the system. They'll say, the doctor will say, okay, what level is your pain, 1 through 10? They'll say, oh, it's a 10, doc, it's a 10. Hello? And the doctor will say, do you have a drug problem? Why? The doctor's reading their face. Okay? The doctor knows what a person with 10 pain looks like. Your face can't hide it. How many of you hear what I'm saying? So this is important. This is what all happened in the 90s. It's a good thing because we don't like pain. And we want our doctor to care about if we're having pain. But the problem is that it promoted a wider and broader use of pain medicines. And so now people that don't show or have a history of drug abuse will walk in, good people walk in, and let's just say that they have migraines. And the doctor will put them on a regimen, a treatment, and eventually, like anything, even for people that aren't addicted to drugs, over time, the longer it goes, the more you need. I know because I had migraines until 2 years ago. God healed me supernaturally. All of my life, my wife will tell you, we spent hundreds of dollars on me trying to keep my migraines under control and never really could. Okay? You know, in other words, this is truly a testimony. I don't know why I had to be 58 before I got healed, but I can remember as a little boy, I couldn't see the chalkboard because I had such tears from water in my eyes from the pain in my head. So as far back as I can remember, 4 or 5 days a week, I would have such an excruciating headache, I couldn't hardly function. But you know what? Until I was in my 40s, I didn't even know I had migraines. I thought that it was normal. I thought everybody hurt like that, and everybody had headaches. Because once in a while, somebody would say, I got a headache. I'd always say, well, I do too. You know? And then it's been wonderful not to have any pain. You know, praise God. So, but I know from my own personal experience that they try everything they can to help you. And it works for a while. Some things works for a while. But then the problem happens is you either get what they call rebound effect, which means the medicine you're taking, this happened to me, the medicine you're taking makes your headaches worse than they were before you took it, but you don't know it, so you keep taking it. Okay? And then they want to have to dry you out, you know, and start you over on something else. And so it becomes a thing. Well, a lot of people end up where the doctor says, depending on their diagnosis, the doctor says you should be over your pain by now. Let's say it's a broke arm, okay, or something like that. And after a period of time, it should be healed and the pain should be gone. The doctor says, but you're still asking for strong pain medicine. The doctor says, no, I've got to cut you off. But what happened is they weren't taking what he told them to. They were taking twice as what he told them to. Hello? 3 times as what he told them to. And then they started getting it other places and still getting it from him. And now he says no more. And so what do now? They're addicted. So this is what happens to a lot of people. So let's talk about some surprising facts about addiction that may challenge the beliefs that you have about it. And I want to move quickly through this because of time, but I did want to cover it. The first one is drug and or alcohol addiction is surprisingly common, and we already talked about that. Approximately 1 out of every 8 Americans is living with some form of addiction. That includes drugs and alcohol. Since this figure only includes known cases of addiction, the figure may be much higher. I can tell you from here, it is much, much higher than what actually is documented. It's no different than rape, child molestation, and incest. The figures are extremely higher than what the government reports because they don't know about most of it. Okay? And when you get into actively counseling people, you are going to hear stories and you're going to hear about things that because you're a counselor, you have limitations as to what you can say or tell anybody. Okay? Now, fortunately, if somebody's going to commit murder or if someone is, molesting a child, by law, you're required to report that. Okay? But there are a lot of things like drug abuse that people reveal to you. And you're like, man, I need to tell somebody to save this guy's life because he's not receiving my help, But legally, you can't. You cannot disclose information that you receive in a counseling session. And I would say to you as pastors and leaders, be careful what you repeat because you can get sued just as quick as somebody with a license. Okay? Sometimes and I have known of cases where this has happened. A pastor or a Christian leader who's counseling someone in the church goes and they just simply say to someone, would you please pray for brother so-and-so? He's really struggling with, we'll just say addictions. Or it could be any type of, whatever he tells you is a secret, okay? Well, the pastor or whoever shared that said it in all innocence. But it gets back. If it don't go around the church, it gets back to the person who said it, and then their lawsuit comes, and I guarantee you will lose. Okay? That's why now insurance, like our insurance, we're a little storefront church here. Our insurance is not cheap because we have to have director's insurance, we have to have counseling insurance, because if someone ever sued us, they wouldn't just take what our church has, they'd take everything I have, or whoever made the mistake. You get what I'm saying? Because a typical lawsuit is going to come against the person who perpetuated the situation and the organization that person is a part of. Okay, so these are real important things. Next one is rates of addiction to drugs and alcohol on the rise. I think everybody knows that. This is hardly surprising since almost 50% of young adults between the ages of 18 and 21 have admitted to using drugs and or alcohol. I'm going to say this to you. You're going to see America become as addicted to marijuana outwardly and openly as back in the 50s and 60s they were to cigarettes. If you're old as me, you remember in the 60s, I was a child, but big enough child to know everybody smoked. I remember Christmas, holidays. My grandparents on both sides both smoked. In our house, you couldn't see the Christmas tree hardly for the smoke in the room. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I mean, that was just, people just smoked back then, That's what they did. But you're going to see this happen here now with marijuana because all over the country it's being legalized. Some of it is under the guise of medical treatment. Now, I don't really know if it works or not, and it's great if it does. If it's under the doctor's control, I'm going to leave that to Jesus and the doc, all right? But as far as just using it for what they call recreational, that's what they're calling it. Don't let nobody fool you. Marijuana is addictive. And marijuana is a gateway drug. I know that some of the media is now trying to say that it's not. But it is. Statistics prove that it is. Okay? Okay, so number 3, approximately 15% of children under the age of 18 have admitted to experimenting with illegal drugs. So these are just, these are kids, guys, that are experimenting with drugs. 1/4 of grade 8 students admit to smoking marijuana regularly. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. A gateway drug means that it is the entrance point into more dangerous, serious, illicit drugs. Typically, people who use marijuana come to a place to where they're using it so regularly and they're not getting the high they used to get. So what they do, they start looking for something else. And usually they're going to find it available at a party or on a street corner, and they experiment. They start experimenting with other drugs. We call that the gateway that leads into the real strong, more harmful drugs. Yes, there can be cross addictions. Right. That's right. Yeah. He's right. Yeah. Yeah. If you can't hear him, he's saying that what they do, they're always seeking for that first high, which drug dealers and drug addicted people will tell you the first one was always the best, okay? But they're never going to find it again. But that's where they start looking for other drugs to get that experience. Some people use multiple drugs regularly, and we call that a polydrug addiction, okay? Poly meaning many. In other words, they may use cocaine in a marijuana cigarette, and then pop a couple of something else, and that's how they go every day. So that person is a poly-addicted individual, polydrug addicted. Yeah, so addictions to prescription drugs is a growing problem with young people as well as everybody else. You've heard of OxyContin and Vicodin. You've probably taken these when you've been injured or hurt before. These are not illegal. These are legal prescribed drugs by the doc, but they're actually very addictive. And that's why it's so important, if you're going to take these medications, that you are under a doctor's care and you follow the doctor's prescription, because it can get away so easy. The use of prescription drugs for non-medical purposes is occurring at approximately the same rate as marijuana usage among young people between the ages of 12 and 20. Okay. That's why I would say to you, if you have teenagers, and I'm not saying your kids would do this, but a lot of kids do this. If you have teenagers and you got old drugs sitting in the cabinet that you never finished from days gone by, get rid of them. because teenagers sometimes will just grab them and take anything just to see what happens. Sometimes they buy them and don't intend to take them. They sell them to their friends at school. And that's old prescription drugs. So I'm just saying that's a word of advice, okay? Number 6, approximately 70% of people who are using illegal drugs are employed. So the majority of addicted people are still working jobs. What does this mean? This means increased costs to the employer in terms of absenteeism, decreased productivity, and staff turnover. You know, they're calling in because they can't make it someday because, you know, they can't get the money, and so they're having dry heaves, they're throwing up, they're having withdrawal symptoms, and so they can't go to work because they wouldn't be able to work, so they keep using up all this time. These are the people, thank you, Glenn, these are the people you want to worry about. If you hire somebody and in the first 3 months they've already used up almost all of their PTO, you as an employer want to look closely. It might be that they really have a physical problem or a need in their life and they can't help it, but a lot of times it's not that at all. A lot of times they've got an issue going on and it's consuming their life and it's going to cost you tons of money. And they're the person that once they use up all their paid off time, then they quit on you. So now you've given them 2 weeks free off, you know, over 3 months that was supposed to last all year, and you're not going to get the work out of them, so you just basically gave them a bonus, you know, and bought their drugs for them or something. So these are just things to talk about. 90% of muggings and property crimes, listen to this, including theft, are related to drugs. 90%. Okay? We're going to see later on in our lesson that there's a real reason behind that. The word pharmaceuticals, which is our word for drugs, comes from the Greek word pharmakia, and in the Bible the word pharmakia is translated sorcery. Drugs can be used as a form of witchcraft, and that's what they do. What is witchcraft? Witchcraft is imposing someone else's will upon someone. Okay? That's all it is. When the witch sticks the pins in the doll, when the witch does her potions, when the witch mixes up her drink that she slips in somebody's coffee, what's she doing? She's going to put your mind in a state to where you cannot make a rational choice, and she can impose her will upon you. That's called witchcraft, okay? That's what it is. And the devil is the author of witchcraft. And drugs used improperly are nothing more than a potion that the devil uses to numb the brain and the mind of people so he can steal their souls, wreck their families, destroy their jobs, and everything else. It's a horrifying thing, actually. When you say that 90% of theft, property crimes, and muggings have drugs involved, you begin to realize how evil the devil is. Amen. People do things that they would not do when they are stoned. Okay, the average drug addict needs to come up with $200 per day to support his or her addiction. And I've already told you that's approximately $1,000 of stolen merchandise. A quick story here before we take our break. I pastored over 30 years, okay? And I've been in the ministry 1978 to 2000, I don't know how many years that is. Anyway, this is 2019, so that's how long I've been in the ministry. So I've dealt with a lot of addicts. And you have too. You just might not have known it. But one time we had a precious guy in our church, and this is when I was naive to drugs and everything. See, I've never tried drugs. I've only had this much alcohol in my life. I'm talking about every drink I've ever had wouldn't make a full glass. So I'm kind of stupid, you know, when it comes to it. I don't know what a lot of things are like, and I don't want to. And I wish I could tell you it's because I was a spiritual giant. You know, but in truth, you know, I'm choleric. My temperament, and a choleric temperament says, why would I want to drink something that tastes bad? So when I've sipped on alcohol, I went, that tastes like something I don't want. You know, so I wouldn't drink it. Come to smoking, I smoked a cigarette or two, and I said, why would I want to do that? That's nasty. I'm just being real. I'm not trying to say I'm super spiritual. I'm saying that I tried some things, but I never did try drugs. But anyway, getting back to my story, we had a guy in our church. He was a sweet guy. I knew he had drug problems, but when he came to us, he seemed to me like he was great. But in actuality, he was using coke. And we were building, this was the church I pastored in East Texas, and we were building our new church, and he was a carpenter, and he was so good and so fast, full of energy, 45-year-old guy. He'd just run around there working. And after about the second month, we're all really getting tired, you know, and oh, Brother Bob, man, he's like a freight train. He's putting out to work. And probably 3 or 4 nights of the week, we'd work from 8 until midnight, the men would, and we'd all leave, and Bob'd still be there, running the saw, you know, not trim, bam, putting up. We'd come back in the morning at 8 o'clock, and he's still working. This would go on 2 or 3 nights a week, and I'm like, man, this guy's committed to God. You know, what a blessing. Come to find out, somebody comes up beside me and says, Pastor Lee, obviously you've never been around addicted people before. They said, whether you know it or not, I can tell you, Bob is high. I said, you don't seem high to me. They said, man don't work 24 hours a day, 3 days a week. They said, that's not normal. They said, a man don't work and not eat like he does. He wouldn't stop for meals a lot of times. They said, a man cannot produce the kind of output he's producing for as long as he's been doing unless he's getting some help. I said, what do you mean? They said, I'm telling you, the guy's using. I said, using what? They said, I don't know what, but he's using. Anyway, make a long story short, I found out shortly after that, because I started digging into it, he was using cocaine. And that's why he was just, you know, I mean, but he had been an addict so long to where unless you were an addict or you were experienced with these kind of things, you didn't know it. I didn't know it. I remember one time he was in the choir. Back then we had robes, you know, the choir had robes, and he was in the choir, and he would get excited, you know, and stuff, and that was always just Bob. But one day during church, he's up there, and we got all these people up here singing the choir. They're doing a special. All of a sudden, he pulls his robe up over his head and starts pulling it off. He gets it halfway off and he gets stuck. Listen to me. They're singing a special. He's up here going like this. And I'm going, what is Bob doing? His shirt comes up. You can see his belly. You know. Anyway, I didn't know it. Bob was stoned in the choir. And that, I guess all them drugs in him started heating him up or something. I don't know. But so what I'm trying to tell you is that it can be a problem. I told you this story so you can get familiar with Bob. One Sunday morning, sweet guy. He'd been giving, working, doing everything around the church. One Sunday morning, I show up about 8:30 for church. When I walked in, we had a big platform, lots of instruments because we had a big worship team. The platform was empty. I don't mean some things are missing. I mean it was gone. Every chord was gone. Every instrument, everything was gone. And by this time, I knew Bob. You know what I mean? I walked in, I looked up there and went, oh. And then I said, Bob. I grabbed my phone, dialed his number, and I said, he said, oh. I said, Bob, where are you? I'm at home. I was out late last night. And I thought, yeah, I know you was. And he said, I don't think I'm going to make it today. I said, Bob, and I didn't even ask him. I said, Bob, if you don't show up here before 10 o'clock when church starts and have everything on that platform that you took last night, I said, I'm calling the sheriff on you. He said, ooh. I said, 10 o'clock, Bob, and I hung up. I was real nervous, you know, because I didn't know. I thought he'd done pawned it or something. It's a true story. My wife will tell you. About 9:30, here comes this car backing a trailer up to the front door. And Bob gets out, and he's got a panicked look on his face. He runs it back, opens it, he starts carrying all that stuff in, running. Of course, the men helped him bring it in and helped him set it up. He brought everything. He hadn't had a chance to sell it yet. I'm telling you, I know Bob loved our church. He loved our people. He loved his pastor. He was dedicated. But Bob needed some money to get a fix. These are the kind of things that you're dealing with when you're dealing with an addicted person. 1/4 of all hospital admissions are related to alcohol. Yes, sir? What did I do?
Yeah, and when I say ask that question, did you tell him he needed help, or did you offer help, or did you send him to somebody that took over, or what was done?
Yes, sir. Just quick, more. He had already been through 3 treatment centers. The statistics, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but statistics are that, no, I want them to hear it too, because I think it's helpful to you people. He'd already been through 3 treatment centers in the past and always came out clean, but typically treatment centers that are not Christ-centered, okay, based around the Word of God and discipleship, and that are not 12 months long at least, they don't work. Okay, so all these treatment centers that your insurance pays $30,000 to $150,000 for a week or for 3 months, 2% of the people that go to those actually get clean and stay clean. 2%. And that's a real good rate for those treatment centers. Christ-centered treatment centers where there's no medical drugs involved, there's no secular counseling. It's all the Bible. It's a structured, disciplined lifestyle, and they have to agree to stay for 12 months. 64 to 72% get clean and stay clean. The problem is it's usually after the second or the third time in one. Practically nobody stays clean after the first time. Okay? It's very rare. The seculars, 2% after 2 or 3 times. The Christian, Christ-centered, 64 to 72% after 2 or 3 times. Okay? Bob had been 3 times into 3 different centers in his life, and he would stay clean for a while, and then he would relapse. Because I had already found out before this is why I knew that it was Bob, because I'd already been counseling and dealing with him. But I'll be honest with you, at the time, I didn't know anything about counseling. This is before I had my degree in counseling. This is before, I was your typical pastor trying to help somebody, and I had no idea what I was doing. I would share scripture with him. I would pray for him. I'd talk to him about going and getting in a treatment center. And like the typical addict does, when they know they're found out and they can't deny it and everything, sometimes to stay in the family or in the relationship, they'll say, well, I'm going to get help. I'm going to get help. But they never go. It's like they'll even set appointments, and get admitted somewhere, and then they don't show up. That's real common with addicted people. So with Bob, that's where we were at the time. Okay, he just never had gone again into treatment center. I was trying, but I wasn't competent, and so that's where we were with Bob. And that's why I knew when that had happened, I had been learning a lot from Bob about what addiction does to people, and both the person themselves and the ones around them. And so that was where they were. The last point here, we're going to take a break, is addiction to drugs and alcohol is a problem for approximately 30 million people in the United States. That's a lot of people, folks. That's a lot of people. Don't you think for 1 minute we don't have a problem on our hands. And it's getting worse.